Okay, guys, we're back again. Yeah, we're just back. All right, so last time we didn't get to go into float and integers, so we'll be doing that now. All right, first up, what's a float? All right, we covered that some time ago, but let's do it again. A float in Python is basically a decimal, what you'd refer to as a decimal. So let's just call this one, all right, something simple. Let's call it cows. Nah, all right, let's just call it cow. Weird variable, I know. All right, and we're going to let it store a float. So let's consider this 34.15. Yeah, 34.15. So that's a float stored in the variable cow. All right, so the next question is, what's an integer? All right, let's call this one dog, and it's gonna store an integer. So let's call this integer, let's say 20. So the first one storing a float, which is 34.15, and the next one is storing a integer. So as you can see, a float will give you a more specific count of anything, really. I can't think of anything, but anything. And an integer would be just a number, really. And you're saying, so when is it best for us to use float versus integers? All right, so what we'd probably use integers is when we're concerned about, let's just say, how many, or we're saying, all right, how many dogs are in the field. We wouldn't probably say 34.15 dogs. That's weird. You can't have 0.15 dogs. So you probably, so you have to use, or it's better to use an integer to do that. When we're saying now how much, when we want a specific measurement of something, we'll definitely be using something like a float. So that's when you probably want to use the float here when you want to know how much, and when you want to know how many, you use an integer. And that's really the big difference between floats and integers. All right, so pretty much that's how it is. The thing is, you know, what happens if you have a integer and you want to turn it into a float? Let's say we have our dog here, which stores 20, and we're going to say dog equals dog plus, let's say, 76.45. All right, when we print out our variable dog, what you're going to notice is that we are getting a float. So basically, it's easy to convert integers to floats by simply adding a float in the mix. We now get a float instead of an integer. In order to change integers to float, it's that simple. To change now floats to integers, not that simple. So pretty much that's how it is. And you're going to find this useful, for instance, if you're going to be creating, let's say, something that calculates salaries or anything like that. You'll probably want to use a float. You will always want to use a float. If you're not going to do a program that requires specific numerical values like that, you'll use a integer. So that's the main difference between a float and an integer, as I said before. Now you might be wondering, how do we store values? One of the ways we can store values in Python is through a thing called a list. And a list is just like it says, a list. Basically like a grocery list, like a shopping list. It's basically a sequence of items, variables, elements, you name it, and it's in a sequential order. So let's call our list. By the way, you can't use the word list. That's a Python keyword. We'll be going over keywords soon. So we'll call our list list1. You can name it list1, but you can't name it list. Notice if we name this list, it has this weird color. So that's telling us that it's a keyword. So in order to not let this variable be a keyword, you have to give it a name other than list. So I'm calling mine list L. See, change color back. And we can store elements in a list. So what we do to store elements in a list, you open square brackets and you could put, let's just say 1, 2, 3, and that's pretty much how we'd go about doing that. So you can have 1, 2, 3 stored in a list. So let's do that, and it's stored. So if you print list L, you get 1, 2, 3. So lists are very good in terms of storing our variables. A list can store integers, it can store strings. Don't worry about strings, we'll cover them in our next video. We'll go into them a little bit in depth. Well, strings are basically, similar to what we call words. So basically, if you've been following our videos so far, you're now able to do calculations with Python. Remember the minus, the addition, the power, the whole that we covered in the last video. You can do basic operations, and you now know the difference between integers and floats. And you know, as of this video, should be able to store your values in lists. And pretty much that's it for this video. Yeah, I think I covered most of it. And thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for your subscriptions, and yeah, see you on the next one.